My name is Rita B. I'm very, very glad to be here to donate my time and my humor. And it really is a donation because the first thing they told me was I would not get paid for this. I said, well, the joke is on me then, I guess. They said, Rita, TEDx is a great cause. And I said, great for who? Because my bills still have to get paid. But nevertheless, I am here. Now, ladies, if you feel like you look nice today, clap it up for yourselves. Clap it up. Okay. You know, it's important to keep yourselves up, you know, especially if you're in a relationship with a man. I try to tell my friends, if you have a good man, ladies, do what you can to take care of that man. That's really important because somebody told me that what you won't do for your man, another man will. Does anybody agree with that? It's very important. First of all, I'd like to thank Rosa Parks for making it possible for me to be at the front of this show and not the back. I would like to thank her for that. And I'd like to thank my mother for being here. And she told me that I better say her name on stage. So, Angela, hello. My mother did a tremendous job as a single parent. My father, I lost him at a very young age, and she immediately stepped up to the plate. Now, just to be clear, my father did not die. He ran off with another woman, so that's what happened. But my mother immediately stepped up to the plate, and you know, she taught me some really valuable lessons when I was a young girl. I remember being a young girl, and she taught me, number one, to be nice to people until you get cut off in traffic, and then you have the right to flip them off or call them names that begin with mother and son of a, and she taught me that, but she also taught me to take care of my body, for instance. You know, I remember being a little girl, and my mother, I would go up to her and say, Mom, I have this pain in my stomach. What is that all about? And she would just hit me upside the head and say, girl, let that gas out. So she taught me to take care of my body. She did. But by the time I was the age of 8, my mother had taught me some great things. She put me on the drum set at church when I was 8 years old, and she was on the piano. And I thought to myself, I said, Mom, is this really happening? Can I be a girl and play the drums? And she said, absolutely, you can be a girl and play the drums. So I went through middle school, I played drums, and I learned very quickly that I was in a male-dominated industry. But my mother had always taught me that the only limits are the limits you set yourself. And if you want to teach yourself something, if you want to learn something, all you have to do is teach yourself. So fast forward to 2013, I had a job. I had graduated from Jackson State University, and I was making money, but all of that was going to Sallie Mae. My bank account was laughable. Everything was laughable. And I said, you know what? Life is funny, and I think I want to teach myself to be a comedian. So I did. I started doing comedy in 2013, but little did I know I was entering into a male-dominated industry again. So transitioning from music to comedy, I was in yet another male-dominated industry as a comedian. And before I began doing comedy, I really didn't know female comedians existed. I didn't, because in the mainstream, you only heard names like Chris Rock and Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy and David Letterman. You only heard those common names. But it wasn't until I became a female comedian that I realized, man, there are a lot of us out here. And you think of names that you've probably heard of, Wanda Sykes, Whoopi Goldberg, Joan Rivers. If you go back further, you'll think about Elaine May and Phyllis Diller. All these women in comedy exist, and we're here, but we're not necessarily being heard because a lot of people don't want to hear what we have to say as comedians. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people that think female comedians, we women, are not funny. You can go to any message board on the internet, and if the question is, do you think female comedians are funny, a lot of people are going to say no. And a lot of that is because they think we have the potential to be funny, but only in the context of being ladylike or feminine. We have to stay inside this box of being ladylike or feminine, and if female comedians don't have material that's ladylike or feminine, then we're not so appealing to people anymore. And that is absolutely where I disagree, because I believe that authenticity matters more than femininity when it comes to comedy. And I realized very soon that there is a mindset about women when it comes to comedy that many people have, even veterans in the comedian industry. Comedian Jerry Lewis said, I don't like any female comedians. A woman doing comedy doesn't offend me, but sets me back a bit. I, as a viewer, have trouble with it. I think of her as a producing machine that brings babies in the world. So I was thinking, wow, that's amazing. I mean, and luckily for him, his producing machine mother didn't have access to the morning after pill back in those days. But, you know, this was startling to me. I said, because if this is the mindset, then there's no wonder that we have not evolved. You know, I think that we should be given the freedom, female comedians, we should be given the freedom to define ourselves before being defined, before we even make it to the stage. So this is an example of how mindsets matter. Mindsets matter, and also words matter. And I'll give you an example. Recently, I had a friend who died in a car accident. Another friend called to tell me that he died in this accident, and he said, Rita, I hate to tell you this, but Don is gone. I said, what happened to him? He said he was ejaculated from the car. I said, come again? He said, he was ejaculated from the car. I said, well, how fast was he coming? And he said, I don't know. So this is an example of how words really do matter, because all this time, I'm thinking his ejaculation was the cause of his death, and it wasn't. He was ejected from the car. So yeah, just keep that in mind. But words do matter, and mindsets matter as well. And I found this list of 26 words that we only use to describe women, all right? So let's take a look at some of these words. Airhead, bossy, bubbly, hysterical, frumpy, sassy, voluptuous, and these are words that are typically only used to describe women. And I said, you know what, that's really concerning. You don't see any words on here like fearless or strong or resilient. And I said, if this is the overall mindset of people when it comes to women, you can see why it's kind of tough for us to evolve. But there's a comedian who has a mindset about comedy that I really, really like. Kelly Howard says, comedy is about taking the woes of life and laughing at them, and emotions are genderless. I said, now if this is true, if comedy is about taking the woes of life and laughing at them and emotions are genderless, then comedy is less about being feminine and being ladylike and more about being authentic and being human. So as a comedian, I feel that sometimes as humans, we have shared experiences, whether you are a male or female. You have shared human experiences. And as a female comedian, I should have the right to talk about those things just like a male comedian. For instance, as humans, at some point, all of us are going to have to do the number 2 at work, right? At some point, that's going to happen, all right? And as a comedian, this is a very funny experience for me. It has nothing to do with being ladylike. It has everything to do with being authentic. So I hate doing the number 2 at work. I'll just be honest. I hate doing it because you can't focus. You have to get in there and get out before somebody sees your shoes. And I know you guys can relate to this, because if your coworker sees your shoes underneath the stall, then later on they're going to know that that was you, you know. They'll see you in the hallway later on, and they'll look up and look down and say, oh my God, that was you in there blowing up the bathroom earlier. And you don't want that kind of reputation at work, you know. So I encourage you guys to get like me. I have 2 pairs of shoes. I have regular shoes and number 2 shoes, okay? Get you some number 2 shoes, people, all right? But the point I'm trying to make is that is a shared human experience, right? And so a male or a female comedian should be able to talk about those types of things. A lot of female comedians have these authentic experiences, but we don't have the platforms to show off our authenticity. So this is a chart that I found. A researcher gathered some data at Caroline's on Broadway in New York, which is a very, very popular comedy club. And over the course of 3 years, 2011 through 2014, he gathered data on the amount of women that were performing in this club. So there were men and women. Out of all of the men and women, only 21.3% of MCs, mid-level comics, they have more time on stage. Only 14.3% of them performed at this club over the span of 3 years. And then your headliners is a whopping 8.3%. So this is a club, a comedy club, a premier comedy club that displays the best at their club. And this is the amount of women that were performing over the course of 3 years. And it's kind of ridiculous. So until people agree with me that authenticity matters more than femininity, this number is going to stay the same. It's not going to move. But the slogan at Caroline's on Broadway is, "We are America's premier comedy club." That's a nice slogan. But if I were to rename the slogan, it would be this: funny is funny, whether you have tits or not. Thank you.